The breathing on the other side of the basement door wasn't my friend's dad, and we were seconds away from opening it. When I was about 11, my best friend Marcus invited me to sleep over at his grandparents' old farmhouse where his family had just moved in. The place was huge, with creaking floors and rooms they hadn't even unpacked yet. Marcus's bedroom was on the second floor, and beneath it was this ancient basement with a dirt floor that his parents used for storage. That first night, we stayed up late playing video games with the volume low so we wouldn't wake anyone. Around 1 a.m., we heard it, a scraping sound coming from directly below us, like something heavy being dragged across that dirt floor. We paused the game and listened. The scraping stopped, then started again, moving slowly across the length of the basement. Marcus whispered that it was probably his dad moving boxes, but his voice was shaking. We crept downstairs to check, and I remember my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The basement door was at the end of the kitchen, and when we got close, we could hear breathing on the other side. Not normal breathing either. It was labored and wet sounding. Marcus reached for the doorknob, but I grabbed his arm and shook my head. We stood there frozen for what felt like forever until the breathing suddenly stopped. Then we heard footsteps, but they weren't walking toward the stairs. They were walking away, toward the back of the basement where there was a small window. We heard that window scrape open. Without saying a word, we both sprinted back upstairs and locked ourselves in his room. We pushed his dresser against the door and didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, Marcus's dad found the basement window wide open and muddy footprints leading from it to the area under Marcus's room. There were also empty food containers scattered around and a sleeping bag wadded up in the corner. His dad called the police, and they told us someone had likely been squatting in the basement for at least a few days, coming and going through that window. They found the person 2 weeks later. He'd broken into another house 3 streets over and was living in their crawl space. The police told Marcus's parents the man had a history of breaking and entering, but never got violent. Still, I think about what would have happened if Marcus had opened that basement door. I think about those wet, labored breaths on the other side, and how close we were to coming face to face with whoever was down there. I was one of the girls who was supposed to die that night. It was October 2014, and my friend Vanessa had invited 6 of us to her Sweet 16 sleepover party. Vanessa was obsessed with social media, always talking about going viral and getting thousands of followers. She'd post everything: her outfits, her meals, even her homework. She was constantly on her phone, refreshing Instagram and Twitter, checking how many likes she'd gotten. We all thought it was a little excessive, but we didn't think much of it. Everyone our age was like that to some degree. The party started normal enough. Vanessa's parents had decorated the basement with balloons and streamers, ordered pizza, and set up a projector for movies. There were 7 of us total: me, Vanessa, and 5 other girls from school: Madison, Kira, Bree, Haley, and Jess. Vanessa's parents stayed upstairs and told us to have fun, but keep the noise down. Around 10 p.m., Vanessa suggested we play Truth or Dare. We sat in a circle on sleeping bags and started with the typical stuff: who do you have a crush on, prank call someone, that kind of thing. But then Vanessa dared Madison to go into the storage room at the back of the basement and stay there for 5 minutes in the dark. Madison laughed it off and went in. That's when I heard the scream. It was short and sharp, then suddenly cut off. We all jumped up and ran toward the storage room. Vanessa got there first and flung the door open. Madison was on the floor, convulsing. There was foam coming from her mouth, and her eyes were rolled back. We were all screaming, panicking, and Vanessa yelled for someone to get her parents. Bree ran upstairs while the rest of us stood there frozen, watching Madison's body twitch and then go completely still. Vanessa's dad came running down and immediately called 911, but by the time the ambulance arrived, Madison was already gone. The paramedics said it looked like a seizure, possibly caused by a severe allergic reaction. Madison had a nut allergy that we all knew about, but she'd been careful at the party. The pizza didn't have nuts, and neither did any of the snacks we'd eaten. Still, the paramedics took her body and said they'd investigate. We were all in shock. Vanessa was crying hysterically, and her parents were trying to comfort all of us. They called our parents to pick us up, but it was late and some of them couldn't come right away. Vanessa insisted we stay. She said Madison would have wanted us to stay together and support each other. Looking back now, that should have been the first red flag. Around 1 a.m., after things had calmed down slightly, Vanessa suggested we try to get some sleep. We were all exhausted from crying and the trauma of what we just witnessed. Vanessa brought out mugs of hot chocolate for everyone to help us relax. I remember thinking it was sweet of her to try and take care of us after everything. We each took a mug and drank slowly, sitting in a somber circle. About 20 minutes later, Kira said she felt dizzy. Then Haley said her stomach hurt. Before I could process what was happening, Kira collapsed. Then Haley. Then Bree started gasping for air, clutching her throat. I looked at Jess and saw the terror in her eyes as she began to understand what I was realizing. The hot chocolate. I looked at Vanessa, and for just a split second, I saw something in her expression that made my blood run cold. It wasn't fear or confusion. It was focus. She was watching us with this intense, calculating look, like she was taking mental notes. Then she noticed me staring, and her face immediately shifted to panic. She started screaming for her parents again, but I grabbed Jess's arm and pulled her toward the basement stairs. I don't know why I didn't drink much of the hot chocolate. Maybe it was too hot, or maybe some subconscious part of me sensed danger, but I'd only taken a few small sips. Jess had barely touched hers either. We stumbled up the stairs and into the kitchen where Vanessa's parents were. I was trying to explain what happened, but the words weren't coming out right. I felt dizzy and my vision was blurring. Jess collapsed next to me. Vanessa's mom called 911 again while her dad ran down to the basement. Everything after that is fragmented. I remember paramedics, flashing lights, being loaded into an ambulance. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later. Kira, Haley, and Bree were dead. Jess was in a coma and would remain that way for 3 weeks before passing away. The doctors said we'd all been poisoned with antifreeze mixed into the hot chocolate. I survived because I'd ingested the least amount. The police investigation focused on Vanessa's parents at first, thinking maybe there had been some horrible accident with containers being mixed up. But Vanessa's parents were devastated and cooperative. They let the police search everything. The antifreeze bottle was found in the garage, half empty, but there were no fingerprints on it. The case went cold. Vanessa played the role of traumatized survivor perfectly. She gave tearful interviews about losing her best friends on her birthday. She posted long tributes on social media that got thousands of shares. She started a fundraiser for the families and raised over $30,000. People called her brave and strong. She gained 50,000 followers in a month. I tried to tell people what I saw in her face that night, but no one believed me. They said I was traumatized and looking for someone to blame. The police said there was no evidence pointing to Vanessa. They thought maybe someone had broken in and poisoned us, or that it was some targeted attack from an outside source. The case remained unsolved. 10 years passed. I moved away, changed my name, and tried to forget. Then, about 6 months ago, I got a call from Madison's younger sister, Sophie. She was 21 now and had been going through old boxes of Madison's things. She found a diary that Madison had kept, and on the last page, dated the day before the sleepover, was an entry that made Sophie's blood run cold. Madison had written about how Vanessa had been acting strange the week leading up to the party. Vanessa had asked Madison weird questions about what happens when people die, if Madison thought anyone would care if something happened to them, and whether Madison had ever thought about what it would take to become famous overnight. Madison wrote that she was concerned about Vanessa's obsession with the news story she'd seen about a tragedy that had gone viral. Vanessa had apparently said, "That's the kind of thing that makes you unforgettable. People remember tragedy forever." Sophie took the diary to her mother, who immediately contacted the police. They reopened the case. When they searched Vanessa's childhood home, which her parents had sold years earlier, they found something the new owners had discovered during renovations: a hidden compartment in Vanessa's old bedroom closet. Inside was a notebook filled with plans. Detailed, methodical plans. Vanessa had written everything out. How much antifreeze would be needed, which girl had which allergy. She'd planned Madison's death separately with crushed peanuts hidden in the storage room. How she'd dispose of evidence. How she'd react when questioned. And throughout the notebook, over and over, she'd written things like, "This will break the internet, and everyone will know my name," and "tragedy equals virality." There were practice drafts of the social media posts she'd eventually make. She'd written them weeks before the sleepover even happened. The police arrested Vanessa last month. She's 26 now, working as a social media influencer with over 2 million followers. When they took her into custody, she didn't deny it. She seemed almost proud. In her interrogation, she said she'd studied viral tragedies for months before planning the sleepover. She said she knew exactly how people would react, how the story would spread, how she'd become the center of national attention. She said it worked better than she'd even imagined. She said the only mistake she made was not killing me, and Jess too. The trial is set for next spring. The prosecution is seeking 4 counts of first-degree murder. Vanessa's legal team is trying to argue diminished capacity due to social media addiction and mental illness, but the notebook makes it hard to claim anything other than premeditated murder. I still have nightmares about that night, about drinking that hot chocolate, about the look on Vanessa's face as she watched her friends die, about how she hugged me in the hospital days later and cried on my shoulder while I recovered, all while knowing she'd tried to kill me. For girls died because someone wanted a trend, because someone wanted followers and fame and their name in headlines. And for 10 years, she got exactly what she wanted. She got away with it while building an empire on their graves. I'm testifying at the trial. I'm going to tell everyone what I saw in her eyes that night. And this time, people are going to listen. Nobody ever found out what happened to the other 3 boys. It was the summer of 1985, and I was 14 years old. My friend Tommy had just gotten back from visiting his uncle's cabin up in the mountains, and he wouldn't stop talking about it. He said his uncle had this huge property with trails, a lake, and the cabin was stocked with arcade games and a pool table. Tommy's parents were going out of town for the weekend and said he could invite some friends to stay at the cabin if his older brother Mike supervised us. Mike was 17 and had his license, so Tommy's parents figured we'd be fine. Tommy invited me and 2 other guys from our neighborhood, Chris and Danny. We were all excited. This was before cell phones and the internet, so a weekend away from our parents with no way for them to check on us felt like ultimate freedom. We packed our sleeping bags, flashlights, and enough snacks to last a month. Mike drove us up Friday afternoon in his beat-up truck. The drive took about 3 hours, and the further we got from town, the fewer houses we saw. Eventually, we were on this narrow dirt road surrounded by thick forest on both sides. The trees were so dense that barely any sunlight made it through. When we finally arrived, the cabin looked different than I'd imagined. It was older and more rundown than Tommy had described. The wood siding was weathered gray, and some of the windows had cracks. But inside wasn't bad. There was a main room with a fireplace, a kitchen, a couple of bedrooms, and sure enough, there was a pool table and an old arcade machine in the corner. Mike told us the rules. Don't go wandering off into the woods alone, don't touch his stuff, and be in bed by midnight. He seemed annoyed that he had to babysit us, and he spent most of that first evening on the porch smoking cigarettes and listening to his Walkman. We played pool and explored the cabin, finding old magazines and board games in the closets. Around 10 p.m., Tommy suggested we go outside and explore a little. Mike was half asleep on the porch and barely acknowledged us when we told him we were going to walk around. We grabbed our flashlights and headed toward the tree line. The forest at night was different than during the day. It was completely black between the trees, and our flashlight beams only cut through a few feet of darkness. We could hear animals moving around, branches snapping, and the wind making the trees creak. We'd been walking for maybe 10 minutes when Danny said he saw a light ahead. We all stopped and looked. Sure enough, there was a faint flickering glow deeper in the woods, like a campfire. Tommy said it was probably just another camper or maybe a ranger, but something about it felt off. The light wasn't moving like a normal fire. It was steady, almost artificial. Chris wanted to check it out, said it would be cool to meet whoever it was. I didn't want to, but I also didn't want to look scared in front of the other guys, so I went along. As we got closer, we could see it wasn't a campfire. It was coming from a small structure, almost like a shed or a hunting blind. The walls were made of old plywood, and there were gaps between the boards where the light was seeping through. We could hear something inside, a rhythmic thumping sound, like something heavy being dropped over and over. We stopped about 20 feet away and just listened. The thumping continued for maybe a minute, then stopped. We heard footsteps inside, slow and deliberate, walking back and forth. Then a voice. It was low and mumbling, like someone talking to themselves. We couldn't make out the words, but the tone was angry. That's when the door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall and thin, wearing overalls and a flannel shirt. His face was mostly hidden in shadow, but we could see he had a thick beard. He was holding something in his right hand, something long and metallic that caught the light. He stood there for a moment, completely still, and then his head turned slowly in our direction. We didn't move. We didn't breathe. He took a step toward us, and that's when Chris's flashlight slipped from his hand and hit the ground with a loud thud. The man's head snapped toward the sound, and he started walking faster. We ran. We crashed through the woods, branches whipping our faces, roots trying to trip us. I could hear the man behind us, his footsteps heavy and fast. He wasn't yelling or chasing us frantically. He was just following, steady and determined, like he knew we'd eventually get tired. My lungs were burning and my legs felt like they were going to give out, but I kept running. I could see the cabin lights ahead through the trees. We burst out of the forest and ran straight to the porch. Mike was inside now, watching TV. We slammed the door behind us and locked it. Mike stood up, annoyed, asking what the hell we were doing. We were all talking over each other, trying to explain what happened. Mike told us to calm down and said we probably just saw a hermit or a hunter and that we'd scared ourselves for no reason. He said people lived out in these woods and we shouldn't have been snooping around their property. He told us to go to bed and stop being idiots. We tried to argue, but Mike wasn't interested. He turned the TV back up and told us if we didn't go to our room, he'd drive us home right then. We went to the bedroom Tommy and I were sharing. Chris and Danny had the room next door. We lay in our sleeping bags with the lights on, listening to every creak and sound the cabin made. Around 1 a.m., we heard Mike's bedroom door close and the cabin went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I don't know when I finally fell asleep, but when I woke up, the sun was coming through the window and I could smell coffee. I got up and went to the kitchen. Mike was there, making breakfast. He asked where the other guys were, and I said probably still asleep. He told me to wake them up because we were leaving early. He said he didn't feel like staying another night. I went to Chris and Danny's room and knocked. No answer. I opened the door. Their sleeping bags were empty. The window was open and the screen was pushed out. I called for Mike, and he came running. We searched the cabin and the immediate area around it, calling their names, but they were gone. Mike found footprints in the dirt outside their window. Small footprints leading toward the woods and larger ones following them. Mike's face went pale. He told me to get in the truck immediately. We drove to the nearest ranger station, which was about 40 minutes away. Mike explained what happened, and the rangers organized a search party. They combed the woods for 3 days. They found Chris and Danny's flashlights near that plywood structure we'd seen, but the structure itself was empty. No man, no equipment, nothing. Just an abandoned hunting blind that looked like it hadn't been used in years. They never found Chris or Danny. The police questioned me and Tommy and Mike extensively. They asked if we'd made up the story, if the boys had run away, if there had been some kind of fight. We told them the truth over and over, but without bodies or evidence, the case went cold. Mike never forgave himself. He started drinking heavily and dropped out of school that year. Tommy's family sold the cabin and never talked about that weekend again. Tommy and I stayed friends for a while, but eventually, we drifted apart. It was too painful to be around each other, a constant reminder of what happened. I'm 44 now, and I still think about that night. About the man stepping out of that structure. About the sound of his footsteps following us through the woods. About how Chris and Danny's window was open in the morning. Part of me wonders if they woke up, heard something outside, and went to investigate. Maybe they thought they were being brave. Maybe they thought they'd prove Mike wrong about there being nothing to worry about. A few years ago, I tried looking into it again. I found some old newspaper articles about the case, and buried in one of them was a detail I'd never heard before. The Rangers told reporters that they'd found scratch marks on the inside of that plywood structure. Deep gouges in the wood, like someone had been trying to claw their way out. They also found a trapdoor in the floor that led to a small dirt cellar, but it had been empty when they found it. I don't know what happened to Chris and Danny in those woods. I don't know who that man was or what he was doing in that structure, but I know they never came home. And I know that whatever was out there in the darkness that night is still out there somewhere, waiting in the trees. The lock clicking from the outside of our bedroom door was the moment I knew Daniel's family wasn't just religious, they were dangerous. In 8th grade, there was this new kid named Daniel who transferred to our school mid-year. He was quiet but friendly enough, and when my buddy Jake suggested we all sleep over at Daniel's house one Friday, Daniel seemed genuinely excited about it. He said he had to ask his parents first, which was normal, but the next day he pulled us aside and said we could come, but that his family was very religious and we'd have to respect their rules. We agreed without thinking much of it. When we got to Daniel's house that Friday evening, things seemed fine at first. His parents were polite, his younger brother seemed normal, and they had a nice backyard where we played basketball. But then dinner happened. We all sat at this long table, and Daniel's father led a prayer that lasted nearly 20 minutes. It wasn't like any prayer I'd heard before. He spoke about temptation and wickedness and kept repeating phrases in what might have been Latin. We kept our heads down and stayed quiet. After dinner, Daniel's mother told us we needed to cleanse ourselves before bed. She led us to the bathroom and instructed us to shower one at a time, and when we were done, we weren't supposed to drain the tub. I went third, and the water was already cold and murky. I tried to make it quick. When I came out, I noticed all the mirrors in the hallway were covered with white sheets. I asked Daniel about it later, and he just said his parents didn't believe in reflections after dark. We were told to go to bed at 8:30 p.m., even though the sun was barely setting. Daniel's parents walked us to the guest room, which had 2 small beds and a Bible on each nightstand. They told us to pray before sleeping and that someone would check on us throughout the night. The door closed and we heard it locked from the outside. That's when Jake started freaking out. He tried the door handle and confirmed it wouldn't budge. We were locked in. We whispered about what to do, but none of us wanted to make noise and get in trouble. Around midnight, we heard footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside our door, and we heard someone breathing heavily on the other side. Then a voice, Daniel's father's voice, began reciting that same prayer from dinner. It went on for maybe 10 minutes before the footsteps walked away. None of us slept. At around 5 a.m., we heard the lock click open. Daniel's mother came in and told us breakfast was ready. We ate in silence, thanked them for having us, and left as soon as we could. Daniel stopped coming to school 2 weeks later. His family just vanished. Years later, out of curiosity, I searched for Daniel online. I found an old news article from a few towns over about a family involved in some fringe religious group that had been investigated for child endangerment. The photo showed Daniel, his brother, and his parents. The article said the children had been removed from the home. I never found out what happened to Daniel after that, but I still think about that locked door and those prayers in the dark. I watched my boyfriend get dragged downstairs by 3 armed men while I hid in his closet with my hand clamped over my mouth to keep from screaming, knowing that if I made a single sound, we would all die. Logan and I had been together since 8th grade, and now, 3 years later at 17 and 16, our parents trusted us enough to let us hang out at each other's houses after school. They'd always given us the same lecture: don't do anything stupid, don't bring shame to the family, and always be respectful. We'd never crossed any lines, at least not the serious ones. But that night in November 2019, we decided to break their trust in the worst possible way. Harper had texted me around 11:30 p.m. asking if everyone at my house was asleep. I told her yes. She said she was coming over and that I should leave my window unlocked. I knew it was a bad idea, knew my parents would kill me if they found out, but I was 17 and stupid and thought I was invincible. Around midnight, I heard a soft tapping on my bedroom window. I opened it and helped Harper climb inside. She was wearing pajama pants and a hoodie, and her hair was messy from the cold wind outside. She was smiling, that mischievous smile she always had when we were doing something we shouldn't. We didn't turn on any lights. We just sat on my bed talking in whispers, then kissing, and things started getting more intense than they ever had before. That's when we heard it. A loud crash from downstairs, like something heavy had fallen or been knocked over. Then voices. Men's voices, low and aggressive. Harper pulled away from me, her eyes wide. I put my finger to my lips and told her to stay quiet. I thought maybe my dad had gotten up for water and knocked something over, or maybe my little sister Emma had snuck downstairs to watch TV. I told Harper I'd go check real quick and be right back. I opened my bedroom door slowly and stepped into the dark hallway. The voices were clearer now. I could hear at least 2, maybe 3 different men talking. One of them said something about finding a safe. My blood went cold. These weren't my parents. I started to back toward my room when I heard my mom's voice, shaky and terrified, saying, "Please, we'll give you whatever you want." I should have run back to my room. I should have grabbed Harper and locked the door and called 911. But I panicked. I thought about my mom and dad and Emma downstairs with these men, and I started moving toward the stairs before my brain could catch up with my body. I made it halfway down before I saw them. 3 men, all wearing ski masks and dark clothes. 2 of them were standing in the living room doorway, and through the gap, I could see my parents and Emma sitting on the floor with their hands behind their backs. They'd been tied up with zip ties. The 3rd man was going through drawers in the kitchen, dumping everything onto the floor. One of the men in the living room turned and saw me standing on the stairs. He raised his hand, and I saw the gun. He didn't say anything, just motioned for me to come down. I did. My legs felt like they weren't connected to my body. When I reached the bottom, he grabbed my shoulder and shoved me toward the living room. That's when I saw my family up close. My dad's lip was bleeding. Emma was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. My mom looked at me with this expression of pure fear and confusion, probably wondering why I was even awake and dressed. The man pushed me down onto the floor next to my dad and pulled out a zip tie. As he yanked my wrists behind my back and secured them, he asked if anyone else was in the house. My mind immediately went to Harper, still upstairs in my room, probably terrified out of her mind. I looked at my dad, then back at the man, and I lied. I said no. I told him it was just the 4 of us. He stared at me for a long moment like he didn't believe me, then nodded and tied my ankles together too. The 3 men started tearing the house apart. We could hear them upstairs, opening closets, throwing things around. I kept thinking about Harper and praying she'd had the sense to hide. One of the men came back down and said something about checking the bedrooms more thoroughly. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode. My dad whispered to me, asking why I was awake. I couldn't tell him the truth, so I just said I'd heard noises and came down to check. Upstairs, Harper had heard everything. The moment Logan left the room, she'd heard the voices get louder and heard Logan's footsteps on the stairs stop abruptly. She'd crept to the bedroom door and peered through the crack just in time to see one of the masked men grab Logan and force him downstairs. She'd backed away from the door, her heart racing, and looked around Logan's room frantically for somewhere to hide. The closet was the only option. She climbed inside, pushed herself into the back corner behind Logan's hanging clothes, and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely unlock it. She dialed 911, and when the operator answered, Harper whispered so quietly she wasn't sure the woman could even hear her. She gave the address and said there were armed intruders in the house. The operator told her to stay hidden and keep the line open. Officers were being dispatched. Downstairs, the men were getting frustrated. One of them kept asking my dad where the safe was, and my dad kept saying we didn't have one. The man didn't believe him. He pressed the gun against my dad's head and said he'd count to 5. My mom started sobbing, begging him to stop, saying we really didn't have a safe. Emma was hyperventilating. I felt completely helpless, tied up, and useless. The man counted. 1, 2, 3. My dad closed his eyes. 4. I screamed at them that we didn't have anything valuable, that we were just a normal family. 5. The gun didn't go off. The man lowered it and turned to his partners. He said something about checking upstairs one more time. 2 of them headed for the stairs. I felt like I was going to throw up. In the closet, Harper heard the footsteps coming up the stairs. She pressed herself further into the corner, barely breathing. The bedroom door opened and the light switched on. Through the slats in the closet door, she could see 2 masked figures enter. One of them started checking under the bed while the other opened dresser drawers. They were being thorough this time. One of them walked directly toward the closet. Harper closed her eyes. The 911 operator was still on the line, and Harper could hear her saying that units were 2 minutes away. The closet door opened. For a moment, nothing happened. The man stood there, looking at the clothes hanging in front of him. Harper could see his boots through a gap in the hanging shirts. He reached in and started pushing clothes aside. His hand was inches from Harper's face. Then, from downstairs, the third man shouted something urgent. Police sirens. Still distant, but getting closer. The man at the closet turned and ran out of the room. Harper heard all 3 of them scrambling, yelling at each other. She heard the back door slam open, then silence except for the sirens getting louder and louder. Harper stayed in the closet until she heard voices she recognized. Police officers clearing the house, calling out that they were coming upstairs. She opened the closet door slowly and stepped out, her legs barely supporting her weight. An officer appeared in the doorway, gun drawn, then lowered it when he saw she was just a teenager. He asked if she was hurt. She shook her head and asked if Logan and his family were okay. The officer helped her downstairs. The living room was full of police now. Someone was cutting the zip ties off Logan and his family. Emma was still crying, held tightly by their mom. Logan's dad was talking to an officer, trying to explain what happened. When Logan saw Harper, his face went through about a dozen different emotions. Relief, confusion, fear. The police had questions. A lot of questions. Why was Harper there? Why hadn't her parents known? Why had Logan lied to the intruders about being alone upstairs? We told them everything. Well, almost everything. We left out some of the details about why Harper had come over. My parents were too shaken up to be angry at first. They were just glad everyone was alive. The police told us we were incredibly lucky. The 3 men had been tied to a string of home invasions in the area over the past 2 months. They'd gotten increasingly violent with each one. In the last invasion before ours, they'd pistol-whipped a homeowner who'd tried to fight back. The fact that the police arrived when they did likely saved us from something much worse. The men were caught 3 days later trying to rob another house 2 towns over. Harper's lied to me about coming over without her parents knowing turned into a massive ordeal. Her mom and dad were furious when the police called them at 2 a.m. to explain that their daughter had snuck out and was involved in a home invasion incident. Harper was grounded for 3 months. My parents grounded me for 2 months and made me go to therapy because I'd been having nightmares about that night. But Harper's phone call to 911 was also what saved my family. The police told us that if she hadn't called when she did, things could have gone much worse. The intruders were getting desperate and aggressive, and there's no telling what they would have done if they'd had more time. Logan and I are both 19 now. We're still together, though our parents watched us like hawks for over a year after that night. We don't sneak around anymore. That night taught us that the rules our parents gave us weren't just about shame or trust, they were about safety. About knowing where your kids are in case something goes wrong. Emma still has nightmares sometimes. My dad installed a security system with cameras and motion sensors everywhere. We all sleep a little lighter now. I think about that night constantly. About how close that man's hand was to finding Harper in the closet. About the gun pressed against my dad's head. About the count to 5 that could have ended everything. But I also think about Harper's bravery. How she kept quiet and called for help instead of panicking. How her quick thinking saved all of us. The police said if she'd made any noise or if those men had found her, we'd be telling a very different story. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just stayed upstairs. If I'd locked my door and called 911 from my room instead of trying to play hero. But then my parents and Emma would have been alone down there, and I don't know if I could have lived with myself. It was the worst night of my life, but it was also the night I learned what real fear feels like and what real courage looks like. And it all happened because Harper and I thought we were being clever, sneaking around for a midnight visit that almost got everyone killed. My cousin's scream is what saved my life, but I still feel guilty for freezing when that man grabbed her. When I was 13, my cousin Leah invited me and my younger brother to sleep over after her birthday party. Her parents were going to pick up a gift from her grandmother's house and said they'd be back in a couple hours. It was just the 3 of us watching TV in the living room when we heard knocking at the front door. It was around 8:30 p.m. and already dark outside. My brother looked out the window and said there was someone standing on the porch. We couldn't see who it was because the porch light wasn't on. Leah's parents had told us they'd call out our names when they got back, so we'd know it was them. But whoever was outside didn't say anything. They just knocked again, harder this time. I stupidly yelled through the door that it was locked, thinking maybe it was a delivery person or something. The knocking stopped. A few seconds later, we heard footsteps going around the side of the house toward the back door. My brother checked, and that door was locked too, but we could hear the handle being jiggled. We turned off all the lights and sat on the couch in the dark, barely breathing. I tried to call Leah's mom, but my phone had no service for some reason. We waited in silence, listening for any sound. After maybe 10 minutes, we thought whoever it was had left. We turned the TV back on, but kept the volume low. Then we heard it. The sound of a window sliding open in Leah's parents' bedroom. My heart dropped. Someone was coming inside. Leah grabbed a broom, and I grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter. We backed toward the front door, ready to run. The bedroom door creaked open, and out stepped a man. He was tall, maybe in his 40s, with an unkempt beard and wild eyes. He smiled at us, this horrible grin that made my skin crawl, and said in this raspy voice that he wasn't going to hurt us. He just wanted some food and maybe a few things from the house. He told us to stay calm and nothing bad would happen. He walked to the fridge and started filling a bag with food. Leah told him to leave or we'd call the cops. He laughed, grabbed my phone from the couch, and threw it against the wall. It shattered. I whispered to my brother to run to the front door while the man was distracted. My brother unlocked it as quietly as he could and pushed it open. The door squeaked loudly, and the man's head snapped toward us. He dropped everything and lunged forward, but he tripped over the bag he'd been filling. My brother was already outside running toward the gate. I tried to follow, but the man had grabbed Leah. She was screaming and thrashing, and I froze. I didn't know what to do. Then Leah elbowed him hard between the legs, and he let go. She ran past me, and we both bolted out the door. My brother was waiting at the gate, shaking. We ran to the neighbor's house a few streets over and pounded on their door until someone answered. The police came, but the man was gone. They found some of the food he'd taken and signs of forced entry through the window. About a month later, the police caught him trying to break into another house. He was sentenced to 6 years. I had nightmares for months about that grin and that raspy voice telling us everything would be fine. The man my dad fired didn't just stand outside our window that night. He'd been doing it for weeks, and we never knew. This happened when I was about 9 years old. My friend Claire was sleeping over at my house, and we'd set up sleeping bags in the living room so we could watch movies late into the night. My parents had gone to bed hours earlier, and it was just the two of us awake, surrounded by empty snack bags and the dim glow from the streetlight outside. I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. I don't know what woke me, maybe a sound or just instinct, but I felt wrong. I turned over to face the window, and my blood went cold. There was a man standing outside, pressed right up against the glass. The streetlight behind him made his silhouette clear, but I couldn't see his face. He was tall and broad-shouldered, and he wasn't moving. He was just standing there, staring in at us. At first I thought I was dreaming or seeing things, but then he shifted slightly, and I knew he was real. I screamed. I screamed so loud that Claire woke up and my parents came running from their bedroom. My dad rushed to the front door and flung it open, but by the time he got outside, the man was gone. My dad called the police immediately. They arrived within minutes and searched the yard with flashlights. They found fresh footprints in the dirt near the flower bed right beneath the window. One officer asked my dad if he had any enemies or if anyone might want to scare our family. My dad said no. They told us they'd patrol the neighborhood and to keep our doors locked. A few days later, my dad started getting phone calls from a blocked number. At first, the person on the other end would just breathe into the phone and hang up. Then the calls got worse. The man started yelling, cursing at my dad, saying horrible things. After about a week of this, my dad finally recognized the voice. It was someone he'd fired from his job a few months earlier for inappropriate behavior toward a coworker. My dad contacted the police again, and they told him to document every call. The man kept calling, always from a blocked number, always angry. In one of his rants, he let it slip that he'd been the one outside our window. He said he'd been watching our house for weeks, waiting for my dad to slip up and leave a door unlocked so he could get inside. My dad got a restraining order after that, and the calls stopped. We never saw the man again, but I'll never forget that night. I still see that dark shape pressed against the glass whenever I close my eyes. Even now, at 21, I can't sleep with the curtains open. If I see even a sliver of light coming through the blinds, I imagine someone standing there, watching. It's been over a decade, but I still check every window in my apartment before I go to bed. Every single one.